We have a complete breakdown and preview of MEAC Media Day, and then we flip over to the basketball side of the conference and talk about LeVelle Moton's coaching tree. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum, and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline that has you covered this season with more odds, props, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Ooh, I am over the moon with excitement for this podcast because this is my first time really doing this, but this is technically our Friday episode, our third episode of the week, right? But we're doing it on Thursday evening, night, depending on where you are. You know, if you on the East Coast, this might be nighttime for you. You on the West Coast, this might be the evening, afternoon-ish for you, but we're dropping it a little bit early because MEAC Media Day is Friday morning, and instead of waiting to recap what happened and dropping it later in that day, I decided to drop it early today because I just like my episodes to be out a little bit earlier than they will or than that event will allow me to. We'll recap that on Monday. Now, what are we looking for in MEAC Media Day? Number one, we have our attendees, and this is from the MEAC website. Now, there are a couple of things that I did notice in this, but I want to read off the list first, and then I'll detail all of that. So Delaware State is bringing in linebacker Kamari Jackson, and then also wide receiver Bazette Woodley. Howard brings in quarterback Quentin Williams and then defensive lineman Darian Brokenberg. Morgan State brings in Bruce Maddox, and then also offensive lineman Dexter Carr. Maddox is a defensive back. Norfolk State brings in linebacker Marquise Hall, and then offensive lineman Colby Bird. North Carolina Central brings in quarterback Davius Richard, and then also defensive back Brandon Codrington. And then lastly, our champions, the reigning MEAC champions, the reigning Black College Football National Champions, South Carolina State brings in quarterback Corey Fields, and then also defensive end Jablonski Green. Now, the first thing that I noticed is that there is no doubling up on either side of the ball for any of these teams. We had that in the SWAC where you had a couple of teams who brought offensive players only. Everybody here has an offense and a defensive player. And that's only noteworthy because it actually isn't, right? Because it was noteworthy when you had two offensive players, but having 1 and 1, that's pretty, And I probably wouldn't have mentioned it if the SWAC did not do that. But that's just a little bit of a different between the attendees on each conference, but it's also a smaller sample size, of course. Now, the next thing that I thought was kind of interesting is Colby Bird is a representation or representative, I should say, for the Norfolk State offense and not J.J. Davis. Both of these players are fantastic. Both of these players were first team all MEAC last year. So the reason it surprises me is because you look at the HBCU sports projection for how they think the all MEAC team should shake out or will shake out. They had J.J. Davis as an offensive player of the year. Last year, he was the rookie of the year. There's the idea or the ability for him to be the offensive player of the year. And it would just be interesting for that guy to be named that preseason wise, predicted to be that, and not actually, be there. I just don't think that's common. You would think that the player who is expected to be the best offensive player or best defensive player in the conference would be a representative for their team. The reason I believe this is not the case is because, first off, they are both fantastic. Once again, this takes nothing from Bird. They're both great players. Bird's older. Bird has been around the program for longer. Now, Davis is a redshirt sophomore, so he's been around the program for 3 years, but overall, Bird has been around longer. But then also, Bird plays center. And as a center on what was really the engine, the heartbeat of that team last year, the offensive line, because look, if you want to have a great quarterback, you want to have a great running back, you probably gonna need a really good offensive line. Norfolk State did have all three of those things: the first place or first team quarterback, first team defense or running back, excuse me, and then also a first team offensive line. They had like 3 offensive linemen on that first team. With Justin Red leaving at the tackle position, you're now looking at Kobe Bird, who is probably going to be the guy. I assume a lot of responsibility has shifted to him, but then also he plays center, which is basically the quarterback of the offensive line. That's why we have quarterbacks coming in because into media day because they're the leaders. Well, Bird is kind of like the leader of his unit. He is the leader, and centers have to call out assignments. They have to make sure everybody knows what they're doing. There's just more responsibility placed upon a center than a running back. So I'm going to assume that the longevity and the seniority, and then also just the leadership qualities of the position that he plays is the reason that Kobe Bird is here. But hey, if JJ Davis wasn't on the team and Kobe Bird was here, there would be absolutely no question. Like, he is just that good. So this makes sense. Then the other thing that I noticed is Isaiah Guthrie is not representing Delaware State. I wonder why that's the case, right? Because you have in Kamari Jackson linebacker, but Guthrie's the man. Like, Guthrie is a player who you hear consistently hyped up when you're talking about MEAC football, HBCU football. I hear Guthrie's name passed around a lot. So it did surprise me that Guthrie wasn't one of the players to make this list. Jackson is new to the position of linebacker. He was a defensive back in high school, defensive back by trade, really. He was even a defensive back at Delaware State. But then he had his first full season as a linebacker. So we'll see. I don't really have no reasoning for that one. I don't. I think that Guthrie should have been the person who represented, but it's not really a big deal. It doesn't mean anything. It just means it's the people who are going to be talking to you. Maybe Guthrie's not a talker. That could be also be a thing. Like, maybe he's just not a talkative person, doesn't really like to do that kind of thing. And the coach knows that, so he's not going to put him on media day. It could be a lot of things, right? And then also, I love the fact that Corey Fields and Quentin Williams are coming in. I expect some jumps out of those guys. One of those guys should probably take that second team, if not first team, all MEAC quarterback position. I think that these two players, they're going to be big time. If Howard wants to step up, it's going to be a lot based on that quarterback. And then also South Carolina State, they're expecting Corey Fields to step up in another year of action. I think that this is a good sign that you didn't bring in anybody else, especially on the quarterback side. This is their team. That's what media day is for me a lot of times. This is their team. No question about it. You have Quentin Williams and then also Corey Fields representing their schools as well. Now, going forward, we're going to be talking about what questions do we want answered? Because I got some things that I think need to be talked about, need to be discussed. And I'm going to talk about them as we continue with Locked on HBCU. But before we get into that, we're going to be talking about BetOnline because they are fantastic. Listen, don't just put money down on things just because, right? They have sports podcasts to get yourself educated. You can listen to them. Listen to your favorite team show on the Locked On Network. Make sure you know what you're talking about, right? This right here is just to tell you where to go because that's the best place. They're giving you information. They give you the best lines, give you the best odds. They give you all the things you want. Right now, I'm in the middle of binging the Ultimate Fighter with Pena and Nunez. I cannot wait for that fight on Saturday. This is big time. Is Pena going to pull out another upset? Should we even consider it an upset? Oh my gosh. This is so much, but make sure when you put your money down, make sure you do it on BetOnline because they are the fastest and easiest. Way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. As we keep on rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. Every day in today's word of the day is ostentatious, meaning overly elaborate or conspicuous. Now, something that I think needs to be addressed and should be talked about at Media Day for the MEAC is the actual lifespan and how the MEAC stands today. I paused a second just so you could roll your eyes because I know there's going to be a lot of MEAC people are like, why do we have to keep talking about this? Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. The fact that you rolled your eyes really, to me, proves my point because it is that big of a deal. If it was something minor, if this was something that you heard every now and then, but it wasn't really a big deal, you're not rolling your eyes. You're not saying you're sick of hearing about it because you do know this is a big deal. The idea that the conference could dissolve is a big deal. The idea that teams are leaving left and right is a big deal. But however, it's not as if Commissioner Stills has not already addressed this issue. She's addressed this issue. I understand that. The reason I feel like she needs to address it is not the issue. It's more so the stage. Now, the issue is a big deal, but this stage is one where there's going to be a lot of detractors who are just going to, bash the MEAC and blindly do it. I bashed the MEAC when I felt like they were going to dissolve. I bashed them. I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those people who was heavy on criticizing what was going on. But as soon as Howard said they're staying and things felt different, I changed my tone. This is kind of a State of the Union type of feel where commissioner still steps in, ESPN cameras are rolling, everything is going. Those who want to know, or at least those who don't want to not know, and yes, I use the double negative on purpose, those who don't prefer to be out of the loop on it, because there are going to be those people, but those who actually care about it, they can now know. So I think it's great. And one other party that I think needs to talk about it is Howard. Because when Howard stayed, it's not as if they saved the MEAC, but the tone around the MEAC changed because somebody actually chose to be there. It didn't seem as fragile anymore. It actually felt like teams, conference that could add some people. At least for another year, there's another year to try to go. Let Howard give the cliche answers. Oh, it means a lot for HBCUs. We love what the MEAC is trying to build. There's no other place we want to be. All the answers that the coaches are going to say, right? The cliche stuff, but it's good publicity for the conference. And at a moment right now, that's what I think would be great. So that's why I'm saying, yeah, go ahead and ask Howard. Let Howard give you the answers that they're going to, say, but then also print those answers. Have those answers go around. Now the publicity of the MEAC is different. You can't have too much good publicity. You can't. Another thing this isn't really an ostentatious idea, but I just want to talk to Damon Wilson and ask how has it been since he's been there, right? He gave an introductory press conference. He didn't come in time for spring practice, so he's not going to have that side of things, but he did have workouts. He's going to be able to talk about players who stood out from a leadership standpoint. That's why I didn't mention Morgan State in talking about the attendees. I listed them off, but we didn't really talk about them because I'm going to assume that Coach Wilson is saying that Bruce Maddox and then also Dexter Carr, those are players who have stood out to them or to him as a leader, somebody who stood out as possibly a captain. That's what I believe you're seeing in Morgan State, who they're choosing to represent them at Media Day. So that's why I didn't really mention them. I knew I was going to touch on them here. And then also Antoine Sewell, right? You stole him from Alabama State. He left Bowie State to go to Alabama State and kind of rise up in divisions. But then now you on the FCS level right there with them, and you still him back. What was that like? What's it like to have your partner in crime right back with you as you move jobs? That's something that I have to assume will make his transition even easier because he has somebody coming up with him who he trusts in the way of his defensive coordinator. I just think that would be logical. And then also, I want to hear about replacing some players. Sivion Wilkerson is gone. Juwan Carter is gone. You're looking at a situation where they didn't leave through the same way, right? So Carter just ran out of eligibility. Wilkerson decided to go to Jackson State, and he had a lot of eligibility left. But, if I'm trying to get somewhere, if it's car, bus, plane, train, doesn't matter. If I'm trying to get there, I got there. The method in which I took to get there, it writes the story, but the end result is the end result. Whether you graduate or you got to go through the transfer portal, the end result is the end result. And that result is you have to fill those shoes. And I want to know, how are you planning to do it? What is your plan? And specifically at Norfolk State, not because Carter, is greater than Wilkerson or vice versa, but Carter's a quarterback. So I kind of want to know, what are you going to do? I would assume you're going to go through a run-centric offense. That would make sense. However, you have to pass. You have to pass the ball eventually. What are you going to do to make sure the replacement has a easier time when he actually has to be called on to throw the ball? I'm not going to say you're not going to win not throwing, but you are hindering yourself. You need to be able to put the ball in the air. How are you going to help out that quarterback? And then also Delaware State, how are you going to replace Wilkerson? What's the plan? Just let us know. I want to hear this straight from the coach's mouth. Well, I'll hear from you too. I would love if you put your comments down below. Tweet me at South Exclusives what you think the answer to some of these questions are. Maybe not the Damon Wilson one, because that's kind of specific to him. And unless you Damon Wilson's burner, and if you are, DM me, don't tweet me, because we can keep that between me and you. But we ain't gonna put that out there. So other than that, let me know your questions or your answers. What things you want to have questions to? Because this is about to go out tonight. So make sure you're checking in on that. And going forward, we're gonna switch over to basketball. So we're gonna talk about LeVelle Moton and his coaching tree in a graphic that he posted on Twitter that I thought was absolutely perfect. Some would even say spot on for our feature Friday. Going forward with Locked On HBCU, that's exactly what we're going to get into. We wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU with our feature Friday. Yes, I know we're dropping this on a Thursday night, but this is our feature Friday, right? So I was excited for this because when I saw LeVelle Moton post this graphic on Twitter, he posted it himself. I said, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect for our feature Friday. And I held on to it and I just waited because I already knew when I was going to talk about it. Now, there is no doubt that LeVelle Moton is a legend, specifically in the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. He has a mural. They don't just put murals up just because, right? You can't just be the coach and have a mural. That's not what's going to happen. You have to be impactful. You have to be influential. You have to be kind of the man in the city. Like, I don't have a mural of myself in Arlington yet, but trust me, I'm gonna be there. They're gonna have me with the little mic, and I don't know. I gotta talk to whoever the artist is gonna be, because I don't know if I want the suit and tie. This ain't about me right now. This is about Coach Moton and the fact that he's influential, the fact that he's impactful. That mural will tell you that he's impactful. So that's not a question, but there was another way that Coach Moton himself determines his impact and kind of even determines his worth in a little bit as far as coaching goes, right? So he tweeted this out on Twitter. He said, my mentor once told me, quote, championships are cool, but if you haven't created opportunities for your staff, then none of it matters, end quote. And I'm excited to serve and assist the next generation. And I thought that was interesting because, I mean, he's successful. He's won 200 games as a coach. But he said, I got to put other people on. I got to make sure everybody is straight that I know. Everybody who's worked with me has been, whether they're still with me or they're just building up. That's a coaching tree. And I recently found out that Coach Napier, head coach of Florida, former head coach of Louisiana Lafayette, is actually under the Buddy Pugh, South Carolina State coaching tree. And I didn't know that. That was something that I thought was actually pretty cool. So I was happy to hear that news or get that little nugget, because I just thought it was cool. It's like, okay, little fun fact for you. But here are the people that he put up there. So he created his own graphic. The way it shows, I can't put it up on the screen, but I will read it off and tell you who these people are. He has their names and then also where they are now. It's a lengthy list. He has impacted a lot of people, a lot of programs as well, but we're going to get into them, right? So John Mosley, president of Lincoln University. Wes Pfeiffer, head coach at Western Oregon. John Riley, strength coach, Texas. Kevin Wilson, athletic director, Lincoln University. Brian Berg, head coach, Georgia Southern. Andre Gray, head coach, Elizabeth City State. Luke D'Alessio, head coach, Fayetteville State. Derek Mallison, South Carolina State. Eric Wilson, Middle Tennessee. Justin Bradley, Seattle University. I told you, it's a lengthy list. All right, so we're still going with it, but he has a lot of people that he has impacted, which is just a testament to who he is and to what he has done. Now let's continue going. Garrett Bridges, North Carolina Central. Brian Cloman, you're going to have College of Charleston. Michelle McLeod. Then you're going to have Georgia Southern as who she represents. The lone woman on this list, right? So it's not just men on this list. It's also a woman on this list. So you got Michelle McLeod for Georgia Southern. And I just thought that was good because we're talking about women in coaching and the impact of that and kind of the scarcity in a lot of places. And this came from a men's basketball staff, mind you. Now she's at Georgia Southern. Jake Williams, University of Milwaukee. Pat Cole, North Carolina Central. Chris Daniel, North Carolina Central. And then you have Pubi Chapman, who's the head coach at Enloe High. Jeremy Ingram, who's the head coach at Fayetteville 71st. Carl Little, Austin P University. AJ Morris, Clemson University. And last but not least, Russian Jones, the second grad assistant at Northern Arizona. There are a lot of people on that list. That's 21 people. 21 people underneath your coaching tree. And if we're talking about what his mentor said, championships are cool, but if you haven't created opportunities for your staff, then none of it matters. There's no question. He has created opportunities for his staff and taken that quote to heart. I love it. I love it, man. He put the graphic up here as well. Like I said, the tweet and the graphic were together. I wish I could show it to you, but it was great. It was absolutely phenomenal. It's a mixed bag in here. There's a woman in here. There's some black men in here. There's some white men in here. I know we're talking about HBCUs, but it's a whole group of people where it's not just black men getting opportunities, right? We love that. I love that. But then also it's just the bag of it ain't just us at HBCUs. You know what I'm saying? Especially the woman getting an opportunity, I think is phenomenal. Michelle McLeod, excuse me. I love it. And I love what it represents. So also you have big time schools, Clemson's, Texas's. That's ugly. Clemson sounds a lot better than Texas's, but that sounds like I just didn't know what I was trying to say. So you have schools like Clemson, schools like Texas, right? That's what happens when you try to make up words and whatnot. But you have schools like that who are big time programs. You see it. And then you're looking at Lincoln University. They have an athletic director and then also a president from the same school. You're looking at the head coach from Georgia Southern, and then also Michelle McLeod, also Georgia Southern. So when you have these opportunities where it's kind of like a big networking where Coach Moton puts these players or these people in positions to succeed. You got a head coach in Georgia Southern. What does he do? He want to hire somebody else who was under Moton. Now she's at Georgia Southern. You have a president and the AD who are there at Lincoln. So the impact is felt at multiple schools, and it's just kind of like ripples, and it's like waves you continue making. You have people who are strength coaches, head coaches, part of the staff, high school head coaches. Everything is represented when you're looking at Coach Moton's coaching tree. I absolutely love it, and I just think it's cool. We should look at more coaching trees, right? I think, and I'm glad that he patted himself on the back and said, look, this is what I've done. This is exactly what I've done. This is what I think he should have done. And I just think we should give a round of applause because we highlighted everybody that he was able to talk to or he was able to put on. And though he wasn't technically the topic, I guess, when you're listening off these people, you got to understand that what they do come back to him. I'm a big music guy. We talk about the people like Drake, right? We always come back to Lil Wayne. We talk about people like J. Cole, not always, but frequently we go back to Jay-Z, right? You talking about MEAC, Wale, come back to Ross. It's when you have somebody who is the big homie of sorts, right? Which I guess, for lack of a better phrasing, that's what Coach Moton would represent. He put these people on and put them in situations where what they do, it always comes back. Same with the Shanahan tree. You talk about McVay, right? That comes back to the Shanahan tree. There are so many things, if we're talking about sports, music, there's so many ways you could apply it, but I don't feel like we frequently do it with HBCU athletics. I'm glad that Moton did do that for himself and put everybody on notice that, hey, yeah, I'm winning. I'm also putting those around me on. And let's not forget about how important that truly is. Almost as important as making us your first listen of the day. Every day, I do appreciate y'all rolling with me on this MEAC Media Week. On Monday, we will be back to recap Media Day for the MEAC. Now, for your second listen of the day, make sure you're checking out our conference shows like Locked On ACC with Candace Cooper, Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy, and more. It's got the Locked On stamp, so you already know it's quality content. Now, in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. I was on a roll with pointing to this stinking Twitter name, and I messed up that time. But you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. And until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.